All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to lovely Portland. If everyone could please wrap up and find their seats, we'll get going here right away. It's 9 o'clock, and so we've got a busy, full agenda for everybody, and so we appreciate you all coming and want to welcome you to the kickoff of the Fall WECC Reliability and Security Oversight Conference. So thanks for coming. I'm glad to have everyone here. We know we also have people that are listening in via the web as well who registered to attend remotely. So welcome to all of you as well. I'm excited to kick this off, and I think we've got a really great presentation and set of workshop topics for you all today. My name is Steve Noss. I'm the Vice President of Reliability and Security Oversight at WECC, and a lot of people from companies to WECC staff to our regional colleagues and NERC have all helped to pull this together. And so I want to thank everybody for the collaboration that they've done to pull these topics together. It's been a long time since I've been to Portland, but it is a beautiful city, so I hope you have a chance to enjoy the city as well. I think we're here in a really nice time of year with the fall colors changing. I know it's a little wet and drizzly too, but that's what goes with the territory to get the green and the mild weather. So it's great to be here for that as well. Let me just kick off with a couple of administrative things, and then we'll get right into the program. First of all, we have the Wi-Fi details here. So if you don't have this yet or on your laptop, maybe take a quick picture of it, and we'll get moving on with the rest of the program. If you need it later, we can have it available at the desk outside where you registered as well. Okay, so I'm going to give a quick safety message. We got the details from the hotel, but I wanted to make sure that everybody knows that we do have exits on all sides of the room. We're just a floor below the main entrance to the hotel, and so there's obviously egress points out there. But the main and primary exit point, especially the one that is ADA compliant, is just behind the registration desk against the far wall over there. So if you were to exit these doors in the back of the room and then continue to proceed to the back wall, there's a set of double doors that exits out into the atrium. We would evacuate should there need to be an evacuation across the street at the waterfront park. And WECC employees are prepared to help marshal people to where they need to go and have brought yellow vests for the occasion, but I hope that they don't need to whip them out. Emergency, dial 911 if you have a phone. Any of the hotel phones that you might find, you can just dial 0. And lastly, we do have AEDs available on site. Okay, so let me kick this off with a big welcome to everybody. First, the last two administrative items are our antitrust policy and our public notice policy. And so we do have an antitrust policy. We conduct all of our meetings in accordance with that. And that means that participants should comply with that policy to not discuss things that might be commercial, market, et cetera, in nature. This is also a public meeting, so please don't talk about things that are confidential or proprietary. And there may also be attendees that come from all walks of different types of organizations, to include possibly the media or the press. We are recording this, and we're going to post the proceedings publicly. And so we just want to make sure that everybody understands that, and we're doing our best to give our interpretation and position on things. And so take that for what it is, please. Okay, so if you're going to be interested in asking questions, we have microphones available for those that are in the room, and we're going to give prioritization to people that are here in person, and come around and try to let them have a chance to ask questions first. But if we do have questions from the audience, please submit those through the WebEx that you're listening on or through the Whova app, and we'll try to collect those up and if time permits, allow a chance to go through some of those questions. Okay, so now we get to some of the exciting stuff. This is, I think, a great opportunity to highlight something that's pretty exciting that happened about a month ago at the WECC board meetings in September in Salt Lake City. Every year there's an award given for outstanding contribution to reliability and security. And this is an award that has existed for some time and was named after a former WECC board member named Armando J. Perez. And traditionally it's gone to, like I said, to an individual. Well, I think it's worth mentioning at this workshop, because this transitions into a Western Interconnection Compliance Forum later this week, that this year for the first time, we decided to name and present the award to an organization. And I think in recognition of the collaboration and partnership that's existed over the last several years with the Western Interconnection Compliance Forum, in support of the reliability and security work that we did, we were really honored to give the Outstanding Contributor Award to the WECC itself, to the organization, the Western Interconnection Compliance Forum. So many of you are part of WECC, so congratulations to all of you, but I just want to give a brief recognition and round of applause. Recognition. And so that'll be on the wall outside of the WECC offices for the next year until we see who gets the award next year. Okay, so we've traditionally done these workshops twice a year. There was a period when we did them once a year. We've had a lot of feedback over the years about what the best format could, should, would be. And so we've been working on trying to develop some updates to the way we think about planning these workshops. And just by way of interest here, who of you in this room would you consider yourselves to be maybe like a first or a second year attendee to a workshop like this, or maybe new to this type of work? So there's a good handful of you. Maybe on the other end of the spectrum, how many of you, consider yourself a veteran of reliability compliance work for NERC standards? And yeah, so there's almost twice as many of those folks here. But the point is that we do have a spectrum of participants, and so I think we have a variety of needs for these types of workshops. And for the last couple of years, we've tried to provide a variety of topics at each workshop. And what we found out is that it doesn't quite make everybody happy for the whole agenda, because some people are here for the program development learning, the specifics about our CMAP program, et cetera. And others are here more for the technical detail. And so we are going to try our best to break out a focus of material going forward, starting in the spring 2025 workshop. And so with that in mind, we're going to try to tailor the agenda at our spring workshops to be more on the program of focus. So that, and some of the folks, depending on what you do, may benefit from coming to both workshops, but we would see this as more tailored toward those that work in the primarily the compliance focused areas of your company, maybe our new compliance staff or newer to the role. Maybe you've come from a more traditional power systems background and you've transitioned to compliance work. This might be a better focus for you to come in the spring and get more of a programmatic baseline of the NERC compliance monitoring and enforcement program. And then by contrast, in autumn, we're going to do our best to try to tailor the workshop to be more technically focused. And so this would be more for those folks that want to get more interaction detail into the specific topic areas of the requirements itself. And so, we've kind of tried to outline that there's a couple of different types of audience members that would merit from these different ones. And these aren't necessarily one-to-one, but we recognize that you might have somebody who's a compliance manager who has a need to be more attuned to the actual program details of the way WECC does its work and interacts with entities. Similarly, we might have somebody who's been in the electric industry for a very long time, works on the power system side, interacts as a contributor to the compliance work, but doesn't do that as part of their primary work. And so they have more of an interest in diving into the technical details of work. And so that would be more appropriate for them. So I hope that is received well. We'll continue to discuss and collaborate with the WECC as well as we tune that agenda and get it prepared for the spring. But we do look forward to that. And so lastly, I'll just highlight a couple of other points about the outreach that we do. We do this throughout the year. This isn't the only opportunity to interact with WECC staff about reliability work. We do have monthly updates that we present. We coordinate with the WECC pretty regularly on that as well. So it's an opportunity to make your voice heard in collaboration through that organization to make sure that we're presenting material that's relevant for that work. So those were my introductory remarks. Again, welcome to the workshop. And if I could just have a quick show of hands for the WECC staff out here. I know many of you want to meet the WECC staff. There's plenty of WECC staff in attendance, either presenting directly at the different topics or here in support. So please take opportunity to go and meet them if you haven't already, or to reconnect if you haven't seen them for some time. So now I'm going to transition to our keynote speaker, and I'm excited to hear the material that he's going to present. But I want to introduce Howard Gugel, who's the Vice President of Regulatory Oversight at NERC. And I've known Howard for many years now. 2011 is when we first met. So we worked together for some time, and he's been a great voice at NERC for many years. He started off in the standards group and was the Vice President of Engineering and Standards, and recently has become the Vice President of Regulatory Oversight. He has more than 30 years of experience in the industry, and I know that he's worked at companies from rural electric cooperatives to investor-owned utilities, and so he also has a really diverse type of experience in the power systems type of work that he's done as an engineer. And he's going to give some remarks to give us some context as we set off the run, but let's give a warm welcome to Howard Gugel from
Let's get that picture off because nobody needs to see that. That's early in the morning. Good morning. I am so happy to be here and pleased to be able to speak with you today about risk. Believe it or not, the compliance guy wants to talk to you about risk and reliability risks. For those of you that have known me over the years and maybe not have known where I've been at recently, you may be saying, what's the standards guy doing up here? And a couple of years ago, I kind of sat back and said, what can I do that would make me more hated in industry than doing standards? Maybe if I went into compliance and enforcement, that might be the thing to do. No, I'm really enjoying this. I'm learning a lot. And hopefully, as a group, we can all make a difference for reliability, understanding the importance of reliability standards and what we all do together. So I want to speak today about our changing risk environment and how that basically is spurring all of us onto action. There is a hyper complex risk environment that we have. When you think about all the things that are going, and people for years talked about the electric industry as being a snoozer, right? Why would you go into that? It's all boring. It's the same thing over and over again. You generate electrons, just ship them on the wires, and they go to the home. But within the last, 5 to 10 years, things have really changed for us. We're beginning to see more and more of an issue about how the resource mix is changing. And, what we did previously, which was basically spin magnets in very large amounts, and then, use that to generate electricity, to a completely electronic method that we go to. And so, we're looking at how that resource mix is changing, how it reacts, the difference in frequency that can be there, the difference in providing grid support. And then extreme weather, as we begin to see more and more, hyper cold situations that are occurring across the system. And then the warmth that is occurring. It's, I had a conversation with some of our friends up north last year or 2 years ago, one of the two, and we were talking about the extreme weather standards that we're developing for cold weather. And they said, we think we got that one pretty well nailed, but we're a little bit concerned about hot because most of our units are designed for cold weather situations, but maybe not for some of the extreme heat that we're seeing in the summertime. So those extremes are things that we need to be taking into account as we're looking at our complex environment. And then policy. If you've read the latest risk report that was produced by industry through our risk committee, but also with the help of ERO staff, one of the things that we highlighted this year for the first time was how important policy is for risk. And so, looking at how that can be transformed and designed there. And then finally, looking at the threat landscape. Cybersecurity is becoming more and more of an issue for us, and it's rapidly changing. And then again, the physical security issues that we have too. So what does that mean? That means that we need to look more at fuel assurance and some of the uncertainties that can occur in that. There's a loss of some of the essential reliability services that we've had in the past. That those spinning masses that we had really allowed the system to have inertia and maybe not react as quickly to some of the changes that we've got. The new electronic controls that we have on some of the new resources coming online are much more rapid to change. They can provide great benefits for reliability, but if not designed correctly, they can also do an impact on reliability too. And then, as we look at hardening the infrastructure and resilience, and then finally, the cyber attacks and how you protect against that, rapidly changing in the risk area. And so I thought I'd take maybe the next couple of slides to talk about things that we're seeing on the system. You can look at how our resource mix has changed, and this graph is a couple of years old, but I think it's still good and representative of where we're at. If you look at what the resource mix was in 2012 and compare that to 2022, we actually had an overall decrease in installed capacity, and also a rapid change in, coal. No surprise here in coal, but also a very big increase in natural gas, and then also in renewables. To me, it seems somewhat ironic that our switch to renewable energy has made us much more dependent on natural gas, and will for the next few years as we begin to try to get more resources online that can rapidly change to the intermix of load and generation. We also, and you've seen this before, some of the risk areas that we have across the system, and the areas in red are certainly the ones that we've highlighted as being issues in past long-term reliability assessments. But we also know that the increase in load that we've seen over the last years has been diminished. Only about a 3% increase in load that we've seen over the last 10 years. I personally believe that that's probably masked, that the increase in behind the meter generation was giving us a false sense of security as to how the load was growing, and that probably was growing more rapidly than what we thought. We're now at a little bit more of a saturation point, and I think that demand curve is going to start showing itself much more rapid in an increase. And then when you look at the generation mix and the what can happen there, may not have as much wind out in the west, but we have a situation in the Midwest where you can see a swath of area that basically, from Nebraska all the way down to Texas, where we have a lot of wind capacity that's installed. In fact, about 60 gigawatts. There was a situation that occurred in 2003 or 2023, where of that 60 gigawatts of installed capacity, we only had about 300 megawatts that was available during that time. So if you're putting your accounting sheet up and saying, okay, how much capacity have I got? How much am I going to get out? You would not have expected 60 gigawatts of capacity and generation to only yield about 30 megawatts. So what does that mean? We need other flexible sources of energy to be able to ride through. And it wasn't just a one-day event. This was a 3 or 4 day event where we had a lack of wind that was occurring in an area where, turbines were put in because it was an area that they were expecting a lot of generation to be available. Finally, that graph down at the bottom is showing what occurred during Winter Storm Elliott and some of the transmission constraints that were there. We had areas where we had generation that was available, but it couldn't be sent out because of transmission constraints that were in the system. And it just kind of highlighted the need, again, to be looking at interregional transfer capability. And then I'll have to admit, I'm an engineer, electrical engineer by trade. And so there's times when I just have to sit down and say, okay, I need to look at the math problem here. And I was struggling earlier this year saying, okay, what is the issue about replacing traditional baseload generation with renewables? How do I make that add up? So I did a thought experiment and said, okay, what happens if I retire 100 megawatts of baseload generation? How do I replace that with a combination of, and I chose solar and batteries or some sort of energy storage? And so it becomes more of an energy equation than a capacity equation. If all I did was install 100 megawatts of solar to replace the 100 megawatts of baseload, that gets me through, if I assume about 8 hours on average of sunlight a day, that gets me through those 8 hours, but I've got to survive the other 16 hours some way. And so how do I do that? Well, I need to do a time shifting device. Batteries aren't generators, but they can time shift for you. You can store them when the energy is available and then use them at the time when energy is not. And so what do? Well, I've got 1,600 megawatt hours that I need to replace there. So I need basically 1,600 megawatt hours of batteries. Right now, the most efficient batteries that we're using on the system with the longest draw are lithium ion batteries that have about a 4-hour capability on them. And that's the best case scenario. So if I want to do that, then I need basically 400 megawatts of batteries that have a 4-hour draw to give me the 1600 megawatt hours. But I've got to charge those when the sun's available. So I need to install 200 megawatts of solar to be able to charge those batteries during the 8 hours that the sun's shining to be able to use them during the 16 hours. What does that mean? 100 megawatts of base load needs to be replaced with 300 megawatts of solar and 400 megawatts of batteries. It's not a one-for-one transition. Not bad, not good. It's just you got to go into it with your eyes open. We've had this conversation with folks at the state level with NERC, and then also at the federal level to help folks understand that this is the equation that we're faced with. And so when you're planning to retire baseload generation, you need to be considering the fact that it's not just a one-for-one trade-off. So what are our 4 pillars of energy transition? Well, one, we want to be able to support this transition to low or no carbon energy resources, but we also know that that's going to require transmission investment. And you all are probably aware of the ITCS that Congress asked us to do, the Interregional Transfer Capability Study. We use acronyms sometimes for the folks that are new here, and I apologize if I use an acronym that you're not aware of, and come see me later if you need it explained, because I have to have it explained to me lots too. But yeah, the Interregional Transfer Capability Study, which we're in the process of completing and getting ready to file with FERC, looks at the transmission issue and looks at what kind of transfer capability is needed for some of the different regions that are out there. We also need balancing resources to be available and to be able to to ride through changes in generation, changes in load, and to rapidly adjust to that. And then finally, the energy supply chain is an issue. Are there enough resources to be able to provide the batteries that we need, the solar that we need, the wind that we need throughout the world that we're looking at, but also other countries are competing for too? And then how do you make sure that that supply chain is secure, that you don't have, nefarious things that can get into that during that supply chain transition? I also like to talk about this system as the 3 Ds. We're becoming much more distributed. So generation is going out behind the meter and then also out on the distribution system and across the transmission system. And we're also transitioning to a decarbonized footprint, like what I talked about earlier. This transition from traditional fossil plants over to renewables. And then all of that is increasingly digitized. Most of the controllers for all the new generation that's coming online is internet-based and controlled from the cloud, or at least controlled through the internet. And so there's a security issue that needs to be taken into place there. One of the reasons why we did the project last year, and I think part of this year for SIP3, was exactly that. The idea that lows need to be, the low impact BES cyber assets need to take that into account, and that a bunch of those can be as impactful to the system as a medium or a high. So putting some additional controls in SIP3 was very important for that to happen. So what are the implications for compliance? One of the things I think that you're going to hear fairly consistently throughout today and tomorrow is the focus on being risk-based. We want to make sure that when we're looking at compliance, when we're looking at enforcement, that we're appropriately assessing risk during that too, and focusing on the things that are high risk and make a high impact. And I know some of you are sitting there going, yeah, but I know the history on this. And we'll readily admit that sometimes we've gotten caught in the weeds. And from your perspective, and I came from utility background, sometimes it feels like all the work that you have to do in those areas are the same, whether it's I missed a relay maintenance program by a month, or my SIP program was signed 3 days late, that may be the same thing as something that's a huge impact on the system. And so we're working to address that and to try to make us get more focused on, how do we appropriately assess the risk on that? That means that changing risk actually may change over time too, and it may change some of our focus. So we have to consider how all the standards work together and provide that cohesive blend, if you will, of protection of reliability. And then also, as we looked at that, we knew that it would also provide some triggers for registration and compliance. And we're in the process right now of doing some evaluations for, generation that it's at a lower threshold than we've ever looked at before. And then as we go forward, there may be some large loads that are coming on the system that we may have to take some really deep thoughts about whether or not we should be writing standards and having some reliability concerns around that too. So what do we want to do? Well, we need a cohesive line of defense. And when you think about all of the standards and then how everything works together, you can kind of see that this is a line of defense that really weaves well. The standards are developed and revised to ensure that we have an adequate level of reliability, that basically across the system, that we meet what we've defined and what industry has defined as that adequate level of reliability. And then we need to make sure that the right people know what they need to do. So we go out and re-register folks to ensure that they know about the standards and know what their obligations are to be able to, to meet and achieve that adequate level of reliability. And then there are certain key functions, BAs, RCs, TOPs, that are really critical. So they need to be certified. We want to make sure that, that they have the capability to be able to meet the standards. And so we do certifications for those three key roles that we have out there. And then we want to, and then I'll focus on this next one, we want to make sure we have a risk-informed compliance engagement for assurance of reliability. And what that may mean is that as you look at the questions that are being asked in an audit and pre-audit worksheets and all of that, you may scratch your head and say, well, wait, there's no requirement that has this particular language in it. Why are you asking me that? And the reason is because we need an understanding of risk. And that helps us understand where to focus on high risks and low risks. So that provides a well-informed compliance program. So while it may seem that some of these questions aren't directly related to a requirement language, they do weave into the overall risks that we're looking at on the system and help us be able to focus on the things that matter. And then finally, we want to make sure that the enforcement process is there to ensure due process and to send the appropriate message for reliability. I know out west that I don't have to point to all of the IBR reports that we've had, but if you have not had a chance to see those on our website, please, visit that, look at those. We've got over 15 reports there that have looked at events that have occurred on the system and what's happening with inverter-based resources. The scary thing for me is, and I'm speaking at a FERC technical conference on Friday, is how load is now becoming a lot more inverter-based. And it's not just talking about resources, but inverter-based demand is out there too. We had an event that occurred on the system out east in July of this year, where a line arrestor failed, single phase to ground fault on a 230 kV line, cleared in 3 cycles. So I think any protection relay engineer would say, awesome, the maintenance guys, the breakers worked correctly and they worked fast like they were supposed to. But even clearing in 3 cycles, which is 1/20th of a second, we had 1,550 megawatts of load instantaneously trip because of that 3 cycle single line to ground fault or single phase to ground fault on a 230 kV line. As we went to look at it more, a lot of that was data centers. We had over 25 substations that were affected and over 60 different owners of data systems that were affected by that. None of those were initiated or load tripped because of a utility initiated situation, but it was all behind the meter, internally to them. Their protection system saw that fault and immediately came offline. If that's the case, and we begin to see larger and larger concentrations of data centers near generation or near other areas, we're going to need to make sure that they have the ability to ride through those scenarios similar to what we're talking about for inverter-based resources. So kind of one of those shots over the bow similar to what we saw with the Blue Cut Fire years ago, right? It's one of the first things that we've seen this instant magnitude of load, and it's probably an early whisper or an early warning sign of things that may come on that. So again, I've got the link there at the bottom, resources for inverter-based resource reports that we have out there. Based on everything that we saw there, we knew that we needed to take a better look at inverter-based resources. And so we saw that IBRs and that integration of IBRs does have the ability to affect the reliability of the bulk power system. And so we did an analysis of all of the generation that was out there and determined that we really needed to look at this in two ways. One, we need to start registering generation at a lower voltage level and a lower megawatt level. And then two, we also need to look at our reliability standards and see how they need to be modified. And so we filed with FERC after, public comment and such, the fact that we would be lowering our registration threshold to greater than or equal to 20 MVA at a particular site and connected at a voltage greater than 60 kV. With that, at least from the data sources that we had available to us from the EIA and others, it appears that we'll have an equivalent amount of inverter-based resources on a percentage basis that we have for traditional generation. So a somewhat similar mix, if you will, for what was traditional generation for IBRs. We have this registration project in three phases. We developed, of course, the bright line criteria for the first year. Right now, we're in the information and discovery phase. So we're working with the Department of Energy, with the EIA collection information to see what we can get from that. We've talked with several of you folks here in the room to try to figure out where some of these resources are located so we can identify them and begin the process of registration that we expect to complete by May of 2026. We will, if you have these resources, you could expect to be contacted by regional entity staff, and certainly out west that would be done by the WECC folks. And we will also be providing some additional materials that kind of explains that process. We are in the process with our communication folks of developing a NERC 101 video to help folks understand who we are and why we do what we do and what the importance of reliability is for the system. We will continue to do ongoing outreach for that and beginning to register those folks very soon. I can say that we've reviewed all the GO and GOP standards, and at least the way that they're written at this point, they would not be applicable prior to May 2026. There's still some standards, development work that needs to be done, definitions that need to be modified, and other work. So that would be determined through an implementation plan on that. So we're continuing to look at that and developing some communication for the rollout that would occur. And then the next thing is Order 901. FERC, based on the reports that we had and other data that was there, said, look, you really need to start developing some standards in some areas. And most of you know that we got the ride-through standard done recently. And thank you all. I know that was a painful process for a lot of folks, and it involved some technical conferences and interaction by our board, but we were able to get that one across the line. The next stage is phase 2, which is going to be talking about model development. And I would highly encourage you to be active in that early on and participate in that too. I think we've got the attention of the OEMs at this point. It took a while to get them on board. I think the ride through kind of woke them up. And so I expect them to be actively involved in this next phase too. And then finally, we are sending out quarterly updates on the registration process and everything that we're doing as it relates to IBRs. Hopefully you all have received these in your email. If you haven't, and you would like to sign up for NERC information, please go to our website and sign up for those adequate resources. I can assure you that we'll make sure that your email is working You'll get all kinds of information on that, but we want to make sure everybody understands all of the things that are going on there. This will be a great one-stop shop that we'll have for inverter-based resources, and we'll also provide an opportunity if you're talking with someone that may, be subject to the standards in the future because they meet that threshold and maybe haven't been registered yet. You can always refer them to this same quarterly update and provide that information there too. Hopefully you all have found that to be a good resource. The most of the folks that I've talked to have been very appreciative of the fact that all the links and everything are kind of contained in this one piece of information. We've committed to continuing to do that, so you'll still see quarterly updates on that. We also post this on our website as one of the resources that's available. And then we're also planning on developing some educational material on that too. I've got about 5 minutes and would like to provide the opportunity if folks have any questions at this point. And if I can't answer it, I'll be very honest and say, sorry, I don't know. But would be happy to entertain any questions you might have.
And come on up if you have questions, please. I know I mentioned that the mics are in the aisles, but they're not moving. So you need to come to them, please. Thank you.
And Alex, I know you're very shy, so.
Hi, Howard. Alice Ireland with PCS. With the registration process, right, we start with BPS.
Mm-hmm.
And currently the BPS definition excludes distribution related. It's worded a little weird.
It excludes facilities that are solely for the use of distribution, just like it says in the language in 215.
So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how the regions in NERC are going to look at that as candidate GOPs, if they're used for distribution or not, and what that sort of threshold or test looks like.
So again, we'll have the threshold, the bright line criteria of 20 megawatts or 20 MVA and anything greater than 60. We still have the opportunity for an exclusion or the ability for somebody to appeal on that. So I think if somebody could come through and make the case that they're not part of the BPS, that it would be something that could go through that appeals process just the way anything else does. But again, I think at that threshold and the fact that it's that amount of generation, it might be a difficult threshold to cross to say that it's solely for the use of for the use of distribution for that generation to be there.
Okay, so no upfront sort of criteria or thresholds being developed. You're just going to have it all go through.
The threshold is the 20 or greater MVA at a single location connected at 60 kV or higher.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, Howard.
Hi.
Good morning. I had asked you this question yesterday at our mixer, but I wanted to just also voice it today. And I love seeing kind of how you guys are looking at how NERC is looking at emerging risks, and then circling that back to the standards, and also how you're wanting to see how standards are actually meeting compliance for the reliability and security of the grid. But I wonder if there's any metrics, if you guys are looking to provide any visibility to the industry in regards to that. Meaning, how is the data that you're collecting from compliance, from audits, from questions that you're getting from entities, from the scrutiny that you're getting from regulators, how is that contributing to the turn of standards, and where are standards doing well, where they're missing the mark?
Yeah, a really good question. I know in some circles, the word align may be kind of a bad word, and we can have a separate, complete conversation about that. But one of the things that align is going to help us to do is to be able to do some of that data analysis that we need, collecting all of the information that we're seeing from audits all across North America, and being able to look at kind of an overall risk profile will be very helpful there. I would say also, there are some requirements out there that I hope are never violated. They're a fundamental thing, but when you start talking about black start and how you restore the system, I would hope that there wouldn't be any fundamental violations of those requirements, because I hope to never be in that situation again. But it's still fundamental for reliability that we have those things in place. I liken it. I had this conversation with somebody one time. Just because you don't have folks speeding through a school zone doesn't mean that you necessarily need to relax the speed zone through a school zone. They're there for a purpose also for protection. And if folks are used to that and they understand the fact that they need to slow down during that area, I would not expect, just because they're not giving out speeding tickets there, that it doesn't mean that it's effective.
So we should be looking forward to that as a line further matures and hopefully see some metrics at some point in regards to that scorecard.
Yes, we hope to eventually be able to develop that, and that's going to be as we do the analysis on the system. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I think time is up. Oh, we do have
Sorry,
more.
Howard.
I'm sorry.
Do we have time for one more question? Okay, great. Hey, Howard, good to see you here. Srinivas Kapagantula from Arivon Energy. One, maybe a two-part question. If we don't have time, we can take it offline. But you said no standards for IBR Category 2s would be effective prior to May 2026. But do you have an ETA on what standards are going to be applicable to those Category 2 GEOs or GOPs, so at least people can start preparing for them? As you know, it does take some time, even if you're an existing registered entity like us, to get ready.
Yeah, the easy answer to that is no, and I have a reason for that. And that's because the modifications of the definitions and any modifications to the standards all go through the public process. And so that will be part of the implementation plan that's developed and would be approved by industry as it goes forward. So, I mean, today we don't have, those are all under development and in process, but we don't have a definitive date saying, yes, this particular standard is going to be applicable on this particular date, because we're still in the public development process.
Okay. So is it fair to assume that once each standard is reviewed and determined what requirements are going to be applicable to these Category 2 GEOs or GOPs, there's going to be some phased implementation plans when they're going to be effective?
Yeah, each one would have that. I would say the first one is going to be the modifications of the definitions. That should spell out exactly what standards would be applicable for that, and when the new definition would come into play. So as each one of those are developed, the timing on that would work out.
Thanks. Appreciate that, Howard.
You're welcome. And with that, I'll turn it back over to staff here. Thank you.